So, what is shadow work through numerology? I know we had a little bit of a discussion about some shadow work in numbers, but can we work on this to overcome our trauma experiences and our current personality disorders or issues? Not really disorders, but issues? Well, let's take a look at this together. Let's do that. So, numerology, there's two areas for consideration here. One of them is shadow numbers, and the other is karmic numbers. Or is it just karmic? That's interesting. So let's talk about this. So shadows are considered psychological. The numbers. Any time you have a number that you could be working in shadow, that's considered more psychological. Once you start to understand it and work it differently, more positively, then it's out of shadow, if that makes sense. But karma is literally, it's more of a experiential. It's so there's karmic debt, there's karmic lessons, and both of these are more experiential. They are they're more specific to your life path. So karmic debt in your core numbers requires some sort of correction, and it's kind of brought over with you from a past life. So that's one thing to consider. Now, then there's also karmic lessons. Karmic lessons are numbers that could be missing maybe in your birth name. That's mostly where it comes from. So we can take a look at that through a consultation and determine where you are missing specific numbers or you're overbalanced with them. That's interesting to think about. So it's kind of an educational area. It's sort of filling in those gaps of your development. Okay. So it feels like these skills are 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 almost like you're failing in a class at school, if that makes sense. And that's kind of what it feels like. So that's karmic lessons. Okay. So now keep in mind that shadows happen. So we've talked about karma and karmic a little bit, karmic debt, karmic lessons, but now we're going to discuss shadows. So this is where energy leaks in when it's not balanced. So if the energy is balanced, you don't get any leakage. It's just a normal day-to-day activity. But when there's a little bit too much of this particular energy, whether it be at one, anywhere from 1 through 9, um, it can leak into your everyday activities. And then, of course, it becomes unbalanced. So, karmic numbers are known specifically to bring out in shadow numbers more intensely. Oh, so this shadow and karmic, they play off of each other, but you can have shadow or karmic debt without having one or the other. You can have karma without shadows, and you can have shadows without karma. That's interesting. But if you have karma, it's pretty much known to bring about shadow energy because you don't always have a grip on it. You don't always have a grip like, oh, hey, I've got some karmic debt here. No, that's not how it works. So sometimes you have this karmic energy, and that's where sometimes having a person, whether it be a numerologist, a counselor, a life counselor, somebody that can discuss some of these areas of your trauma, of your life experiences, of your maybe your current personality issues. They can discuss these things with you. And a numerologist, that's where I can definitely step in and work on helping you understand some of your challenges when it comes to where you want to work on some of the shadows. So this definitely allows you to um, to 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 unroot negative patterns, repay specific debt. That happens with karmic energy and it happens with shadow energy. Interesting. So the missing numbers, and we talked about this briefly, in your name can represent some shadow numbers or lessons. So they show an overbalance or an underbalance. So an overbalance is an excessive amount. An underbalance is sort of a suppressed amount. And you want to know about these, either one of these things, because they definitely will help you to understand your shadow work. Maybe understand some of the trauma that you're going through. It's possible. So, and now keep in mind, we can do, oh, I know what I wanted to talk to you about. So, shadow work is the process of a working process, actually, to face both personality shadows and karmic lessons. Okay, so we kind of talked about this, and it breaks the cycles in life. And I can attest to this because I think I've shared with you guys before that I dealt with some issues with alcoholism. And I have been not had a drink in 18 years, you know. Um, but I have to tell you that one of the main reasons that I stopped drinking was because it suddenly came to me that I was the one that was hurting my family. Specifically, in this case, in the actual instance, it was my daughter. But it really was the whole family that was suffering. I was the first person in my family, and it's not to say kudos, Lori. It's to say this is where breaking the cycle comes in. It's to say that it occurred to me that in this moment in time, and it came so suddenly, it came so suddenly. How about if I would have just ignored it? What would have happened then? I might never have broken that cycle. Oh, I got chills just thinking about that. So in this particular case, I was very, very blessed that I recognized that there was a cycle to be broken. There was something that was meant to happen to change it. And I went with it like gangbusters, like it was just something that needed to happen for me. And I broke that cycle. Now, in that interim time, that cycle has been broken again by one of my children. So it's not to say that life is beautiful and perfect. It's not. But but it's much better. Can you imagine what life was like or what it would still be like if I hadn't just discontinued that one thing, if I hadn't seen the light in that one area of my life and been able to say, that's it, done, done. So it doesn't automatically change everything, but it does make things easier to deal with in your life. Anyway, okay. So that's where I wanted to talk to you because the breaking the cycles really not just talk to me about the alcoholism, the alcohol in my life. And yeah. Anyway, so now keep in mind, we can do anytime you would like to a personal review of your numbers and your shadows. But let's do a quick review of the 1 through 9 numbers. So the 1 represents insecurity and it can represent arrogance. Now, this is when you're working on it in a negative way. Do you have any insecurity or arrogance? Sometimes we can have the ones happening and have a little bit of each. So some days we don't have this arrogance and this insecurity. And then other days we do. So is it possible? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not saying that this is the be all and end all, but is it possible that on those days when we feel that insecurity or maybe that arrogance, that our guard isn't down a little bit? And maybe then we allow different traumas to enter, different experiences to come through. It's a thought process. And again, this is just my thinking on it. So I'm not sure if this is true or not. But, um, let's see. So, okay, so if you feel not good enough, it may lead to dominance and control with a number one. So, number two, this talks about dependency and fear of conflict. That's working it on the in the shadow. That's a negative representation of the two. So, dependency and fear of conflict, struggle with people pleasing, ooh, and suppressing your true feelings. Sometimes I've done tarot card readings for people where the moon comes up, and the moon is often about suppressing feelings. So if you get a card reading done, or if you just happen to be a person that likes to dabble in cards yourself, when that moon comes up, pay special attention to what's happening for you that day, because you never know. It could mean that you're suppressing your feelings through a number two. I'm not sure. So another number, shadow number would be the three. This can lead to a scattered focus and superficiality. Interesting. So it's hard to find emotional depth and maintain follow through. That would be if you have the three that you're working. So, in other words, it's kind of opposite of that joy of living that we want to experience with the three. And then when it happens and we're working it in shadow, we get this scattered focus or this superficiality, let's call it. I'm saying it wrong. So, the number four in the shadow can mean rigidity and fear of change. Mm. Too tight to structure and control. So they hang on a little bit too hard to structure and control. They can't adapt when things go wrong. Mm, that's interesting because the four to me is about in its positive, or in without the shadows, is about hard work. Somebody who is like boxy in their thinking. They're very linear. They think very positively about things. So again, this is where that fear of change might come in, because when you're working on something and you're just working hard work, you don't notice when those changes come through. Okay, maybe. Anyway. So the five, shadow working in the five, provides you with restlessness and a lack of commitment. Ooh. Mm. So always seeking new experiences. That's the trick to the number five. If you can, of course, the five, you want to flip from one experience to the other. And that's fine. That's fine and dandy, except eventually you have to choose one thing and stick with it. That's the trick to the number five. That's the trick to all those experiences. It might take you longer than the normal person, but sometimes, and this is talking about that, there's a sense of restlessness that happens. It's a lack of a commitment to one activity, to one expertise, if you will, you know? And when that happens, they're always seeking new experiences. They they avoid boundaries, ooh, and deep personal work. Yeah, that's a shame because there's a lot to be had in deep personal work. And I know that because it's taken me a long time to get there, but I am getting there. It's happened periodically and a little by little over the years, don't get me wrong. But this past year was tougher for me. It was definitely, and we did a video about this, that dark night of the soul, the void, some of the original shadow work video, the and the zeros. We did a video on zeros. I'll try to attach all those here. Some of the specific changes, numerology that we do. So yeah. So anyway, then we have this number six. The number six in shadow can talk about martyrdom. So the six is usually a self-care person, a person who cares for other people, a service-oriented person. So when you look at it in shadow, you see martyrdom and over-involvement. This is a person who might become almost micromanaging in somebody else's life. So micromanaging, okay, that's one thing to have that in your job. I mean, it's a bad situation to be in, but to have that on a regular, in a mother or a father or a sibling, yeah, that's hard. That's very hard for another person to take. So they may try to control others under the guise of caregiving. Mm. So that leads to exhaustion for them, for the person carrying the shadow of the six. Exhaustion. How can you carry yourself that way? You can't. It's very, very difficult. Okay, so let's look at the number seven. In the seven shadow, you'd be working on isolation and suspicion. You wouldn't really trust people. That can be tough. So you're going to be a little bit more withdrawn and you're going to avoid being vulnerable, a disconnect from reality. So a seven in the positive is more business oriented. They tend to be research oriented. They are very analytical. Yeah, so when you take this into a negative feeling, because being shy can be part of being a seven, and you have to work at being a person that's out there in front of others. You have to work a little bit more at that. So it's understandable that during a shadow period of this, and including the seven, you might come across being isolated and suspicious of others. And that's a little bit hard. That's a little bit difficult to deal with. Yeah. So let's talk about the number eight. The number eight in shadow provides us a perfect situation for greed and workaholism. Yeah. So there's bad self-worth, and bad areas of status and success. Their spiritual needs are just ignored. They don't. That's one of the things about the number seven that, or about the number eight, that we really enjoy, is bringing about some of these spiritual changes, or working forward, bringing them forward from working other numbers. But for you that work the shadow in the eight, beware, and let's talk about this. Let's talk it through a little bit. So then we have the nine in shadow, which it brings on a difficulty of letting go. So that's the one thing that we really enjoy about a number nine, is that it allows us to let go of the things that don't serve us anymore. So what the shadow does is it makes you hold on to the things that are not serving you anymore, but you don't recognize that. You don't recognize it. So it holds on to past resentments. That's the number nine in shadow. Failures and outdated relationships. It delays personal growth. That's really, really important, because the personal growth is that's what moves you forward. Personal growth. Yeah. So there's one thing more I wanted to say. There are multiple shadow calculations, multiples of them, in order to get to the numbers that we just discussed, the one through nine. And this is a brief overview. Um, we already look at the challenges, which we calculate when we do the birth date. That's how we get to that point. So, but this is another way that we're going to go over here today. We're going to go over a quick calculation. It's another way of learning about the personal inner turmoil, and the trauma and the shadow numbers. It's just it's another more intense way of calculating a shadow number. So if you're interested in exploring your numbers and your chart, I can help you. We can calculate and discuss the challenges, and we can explore the shadow traits that your birthday plus the life path calculation reveal. So again, we looked at the number 1 through 9. It exists on a spectrum. Remember that. Remember that it exists on a spectrum so that you're not really quite sure where you're going to be one day. And we kind of briefly talked about this with the number 1, but it's very true. So there's either that overbalance, underbalance, or what we're striving for is a balance and in between. That's what we want. So in order for you to calculate, or for us to calculate a shadow number, we're going to look at your birthday, which in this case, in my case, we're going to look at the example of my birth date, which is the 28th. The 8 plus 2 equals 10, and the 1 plus 0 equals 1. So that's the one number that we're going to use to subtract. So we're going to subtract the birthday from the life path, depending upon which is bigger. It doesn't matter. If the life path is bigger, we're going to subtract that from the birthday. And if the birthday is bigger, we're going to subtract that from the life path. So that's what we're going to do. So now the life path for 4/28, 1958, and I know we've discussed this before, equals 37. 3 plus 7 equals 10. 1 plus 0 equals 1. So now what we're subtracting is 1 minus 1. So the birthday adds up to 1 and the life path adds to 1. 1 minus 1 equals 0. That's for me. That's my personal information. So the number 0, oops, represents it's a whole area of possibility. When you're working a zero as far as your shadow is concerned, it could be almost anything, and you have to stop and look for it. And I think that's the beauty of doing shadow work all the way along, like getting more involved in it. I can remember for myself when I was talked to about shadow work, and this was by my sister, and I refused to look at it. No way. I'm not looking at shadows. No way. I'm not looking at it. I'm looking at the positive nature of numbers. That's it. Done deal. And then I had to. I had to look. I went through this dark night of the soul. I went through different parts of myself that I had to take a look at. Boom, 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 all of it. One, two, three. And now I'm understanding that shadow work is just as important as looking at your regular life, like any kind of trauma that you're holding on to. And sometimes you just hold on to it because it feels like it's the only choice you have. But guess what? You don't have to. And that's one thing that I'm learning with a zero shadow. So I'm hoping that this did something for you. Please feel free to let me know when you have something going on. And listen, anytime you need to talk about anything, let me know. But remember that shadow work is essential to real growth for you and for anybody else. We can talk more about that, but I sure hope that this makes you think. That's so important. And remember that I love you all. And anytime you need anything, I'm here for you. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here with